A small-town veterinarian slams the brakes, sprints up a fire escape, and slices a strangling leash on a 6th-floor window. The puppy gasps. Alive. But inside, something feels wrong. An eviction notice on the door, a locked window that shouldn't be open, and a microchip record that points to the landlord instead of the tenant. More accidents surface. Different buildings. Same pattern. Someone is turning pets into weapons, then blaming the people who love them. The vet teams up with a quiet officer and a tired handyman who's seen too much. Hidden cameras, rigged scenes, a phone call no one was meant to hear. And when the building groans and smoke rolls down the stairs, the clock starts. Save the dog, save the child. Or let a monster erase the evidence. If the danger is designed, who's pulling the strings? And how far will the vet go to tear them down before another life is used as bait? Greer drove past rows of weathered brick buildings, their windows like tired eyes in the fading afternoon light. The spring air whipped through her open truck window, carrying the scent of recent rain and urban decay. Water pooled in potholes reflected the cloudy sky, occasionally splashing against the undercarriage as she navigated the neglected streets. Her mind wandered to the morning's farm visit, a stubborn goat with an infected hoof that had taken nearly an hour to clean and dress, when sudden movement caught her eye. 6 stories up, something small and dark thrashed violently against red brick, a desperate flailing against gravity. Oh God! Her throat tightened as she slammed on the brakes, the seatbelt cutting across her chest. A puppy dangled from a window ledge, its leash caught on something inside. The tiny black body twisted desperately in the air, paws scrabbling at nothing but empty space, each movement growing more frantic. She jerked the wheel, bumping the truck onto the curb with a jolt that rattled her teeth. Her hands shook as she grabbed her medical bag, the worn leather familiar against her calloused palms. The rusted fire escape clung to the building's face like an old skeleton, paint flaking off in rusty tears that stained the brick below. "Hold on, little one," she whispered, taking the metal steps 2 at a time. Her boots clanged against the grating, the hollow sound echoing in the narrow alley. Wind pulled at her jacket as she climbed higher, muscles burning with each step. Sweat trickled down her back despite the cool air. The puppy's struggles grew weaker, its movements becoming sporadic. 5th floor, almost there. Her lungs burned with exertion, but she pushed harder. On the 6th floor landing, she inched along the narrow ledge, gravel and rust crunching beneath her boots. Don't look down. The surgical shears in her pocket pressed against her hip, a reassuring weight. Just a few more feet. The brick facade scraped her fingertips raw as she edged along, each inch a small victory. The puppy hung motionless now, its small body swaying slightly in the breeze like a terrible pendulum. Greer's fingers found purchase on the rough brick as she edged closer, heart hammering against her ribs so hard she could feel it in her throat. "I've got you," she murmured, reaching for the taut leash with trembling fingers. The shears sliced through nylon with a sharp snap that seemed too loud in the stillness. She caught the limp body against her chest, nearly losing her balance as the weight shifted suddenly into her arms. No breathing, no heartbeat. The tiny body felt impossibly small against her palm. Greer pressed her back to the wall, cradling the puppy in one arm, feeling the soft fur against her skin. Her fingers found the tiny rib cage, positioning them carefully. "Come on, sweetie." She started compressions with practiced precision, counting under her breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, the rhythm familiar from countless emergency procedures. The small chest remained still beneath her fingertips. Tears stung her eyes as she continued, blurring her vision. "Please." 20 compressions. 30. Her arms ached, but she refused to stop, refused to accept the alternative. A weak cough. The puppy shuddered, drawing a ragged breath that expanded its tiny chest. "That's it!" She held the trembling body close, relief making her dizzy, washing over her in waves. Or maybe that was the height. The 6 stories of nothing but air beneath her feet, finally registering in her brain. The window beside her stood open, thin cotton curtains stirring in the breeze like restless ghosts. Greer swung her legs over the sill, dropping into a sparse apartment with minimal furniture. The air smelled of cleaning supplies and fear, a distinctive combination she'd encountered before in places where desperation lived. A woman stood frozen in the kitchenette, hands pressed to her mouth, eyes wide with shock and horror. Dark circles shadowed her eyes like bruises, her work uniform wrinkled but meticulously clean. A name tag hung crooked on her breast pocket. "I'm so sorry," the woman whispered, voice cracking. "I never leave that window open. Never. Someone must have—" She trailed off, staring at the puppy with a mixture of hope and dread. "Is he?" "I'm Greer Whitlow. I'm a vet." She kept her voice gentle, examining the puppy's neck for injuries, feeling for trauma beneath the soft fur. "What's your name?" "Nadine. Nadine Brooks." Her fingers twisted in her shirt, knuckles white with tension. "Is Max? Will he be okay? My son would be devastated if—" "He needs oxygen and monitoring, but I think he'll pull through." Greer noticed an official-looking paper taped to the front door, its crisp whiteness stark against the faded paint. "May I?" Nadine nodded, sinking into a kitchen chair that creaked under her weight, shoulders slumping with exhaustion. The eviction notice was crisp and new, the signature at the bottom bold and angular, written with the confidence of someone who never doubted their authority. Porter Lang, property owner. "This wasn't an accident," Nadine said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "They want us out, all of us. The building's too valuable now with the new development across the street." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving a smudge of mascara. "But I can't afford anywhere else. My son, he loves that puppy so much. Saved for months to adopt him from the shelter." Greer stroked Max's head, feeling his steady breathing against her palm, the warmth returning to his small body. Something cold settled in her stomach, the same feeling she got when animals arrived at her clinic with suspicious injuries. The kind that weren't accidents at all, but deliberate cruelty masked as misfortune. "I'm taking Max to my clinic," she said, decision already made. "He needs treatment, but I'll bring him back once he's stable, I promise." She scribbled her number on a receipt from her pocket, the pen scratching against the thin paper. "Call me anytime. And Nadine?" She met the woman's tired eyes, holding her gaze steadily. "We're going to figure this out." The fire escape felt steadier on the way down, Max secure in her medical bag, wrapped in a clean towel she always kept for emergencies. But Greer's mind churned with questions, possibilities and suspicions colliding. An open window in a careful home, a convenient accident, a fresh eviction notice. The pattern was too neat, too convenient. She settled Max in her truck, checking his breathing again, relief washing through her when she felt the steady rise and fall of his chest. The puppy licked her hand weakly, pink tongue warm against her skin. "Don't worry," she told him, starting the engine with a rumble that vibrated through the seats. "Sometimes doing the right thing means asking the wrong questions, and I'm very good at asking questions." Above them, the old building loomed like a sentinel against the darkening sky, its windows reflecting the setting sun in flashes of gold and crimson. Somewhere on the 6th floor, a curtain fluttered in an open window. Waiting. Watching. The first battle in a war Greer hadn't known she'd be fighting. but one she now knew she couldn't walk away from. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Greer carried the puppy into her clinic's treatment room. Her assistant, Jenny, gasped when she saw the tiny bundle, her hand flying to her mouth in shock at the animal's condition. "Get the oxygen set up," Greer instructed, laying the puppy on the examination table with practiced gentleness. Her hands moved with the efficiency born from years of emergency care, checking vital signs while Jenny scrambled to fit a small oxygen mask over the quivering muzzle. The little body trembled beneath Greer's steady fingers as she assessed his condition. "Poor little thing," Jenny murmured, carefully adjusting the flow rate. Her eyes welled with tears as she stroked the puppy's side. "What happened to him?" "Found him hanging from a 6th-floor window." Greer's voice was tight as she pressed the stethoscope to the puppy's chest, listening intently. The heartbeat was stronger now, but the raspy, labored breaths suggested significant bruising. "Need to check for internal injuries. Prep the X-ray, please." The treatment room filled with the soft beeping of monitors and the whisper of oxygen as they worked together, moving with the wordless coordination of a team that had faced countless emergencies side by side. The X-rays revealed no broken bones, just extensive soft tissue trauma around the neck, where the weight of his body had strained against whatever had held him suspended. While waiting for blood work, Greer gently cleaned the matted fur with warm water, revealing the true colors beneath the grime. The puppy's brindle coat was striking, dark mahogany stripes over warm fawn, with one ear permanently folded from what appeared to be an old injury that had healed poorly. "You're quite the fighter, aren't you?" she told him softly, scratching behind his good ear. His tail thumped weakly against the metal table, a fragile sign of resilience that squeezed her heart. "Think we'll call you Moxie. Seems fitting for someone who survived what you did." The puppy's eyes, though still clouded with pain, fixed on her face with unmistakable trust that made her throat tighten. Animals never ceased to amaze her with their capacity for forgiveness. Jenny returned with the test results clutched in her hand. "Everything looks okay, considering. Dehydration and stress, but no organ damage that I can see. But I found something strange when I scanned for a microchip." Greer took the printout, frowning at the information. "Recently re-registered? That's odd." The ownership information listed Langridge Holdings, Porter Lang's company. The registration date was just 2 weeks ago, which made no sense for a puppy that clearly belonged to a tenant family. "I know that name," Jenny said, leaning against the counter. "Lang owns half the rental properties downtown. My cousin got priced out of her apartment when he bought her building last year. Tripled the rent with barely 30 days' notice." Greer's unease deepened as she stroked Moxie's side. She remembered Nadine's words about the building being too valuable now, the fear in her eyes when she'd mentioned the landlord's name. "Watch the clinic for me," she decided, grabbing her keys from the hook by the door. "Cancel my afternoon appointments if you need to. I need to have a conversation with Mr. Lang." "Be careful," Jenny called after her. "That man has a reputation." The Langridge Holdings office occupied the ground floor of a renovated warehouse in what had once been the industrial district. Glass and steel had replaced brick and timber, creating a statement of wealth and power. Inside, modern furniture and abstract art in carefully coordinated blues and grays created an atmosphere of calculated success. A receptionist with perfect makeup, and not a hair out of place, looked up as Greer entered, taking in her clinic scrubs and determined expression with a flicker of distaste. "I need to see Porter Lang." Greer's boots left faint marks on the polished concrete floor. "Do you have an appointment?" The receptionist's voice was cool and professional. "Tell him it's about one of his company's registered animals." Greer's tone left no room for argument, the same voice she used when dealing with difficult clients who questioned her medical decisions. After several minutes of hushed phone conversation and sideways glances, she was led through a maze of open-concept workspace to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. Porter Lang stood behind his imposing glass desk, his smile as practiced and cold as the winter sun reflecting off his window. "Dr. Whitlow, I presume?" He gestured to a sleek leather chair positioned to face him. "My assistant says you're here about a pet of some kind?" "A puppy that nearly died today." Greer remained standing, noting how her workday clothes contrasted with his tailored suit. "Hanging from a window in one of your buildings on Cypress Street. Interesting coincidence that he's registered to your company rather than to the family who clearly owns him." Lang's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened. "You're trespassing on private property, Doctor, both here and at my residential building earlier today. That's a serious liability issue that my legal team would find concerning." "So is animal cruelty." She placed the printed microchip information on his immaculate desk, leaving a smudge from her fingers still faintly stained with antiseptic. "Care to explain why a tenant's pet is registered to Langridge Holdings as of 2 weeks ago?" "I'm a busy man with numerous properties to manage." He settled into his leather chair with practiced ease, steepling his fingers. "If you have concerns about tenant pet policies, take them up with building management. Through proper channels, of course." People are scared to speak up. I could see it in their eyes. "But I'm not a tenant, Mr. Lang, and I'm very good at asking uncomfortable questions, especially when animals are suffering." Her voice remained level, professional, though anger simmered beneath. His smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Be careful, Dr. Whitlow. Questions can lead to unfortunate answers. I'd hate to see your practice face any regulatory complications. Small businesses are so vulnerable these days, aren't they? Health department inspections, zoning reviews, so many potential issues that can arise unexpectedly." The threat was velvet smooth, but unmistakably clear. Greer met his gaze steadily, refusing to be the first to look away. "Funny thing about veterinarians, Mr. Lang, we're used to dealing with creatures that bite, even the ones that wear expensive suits." She left without waiting for his response, her hands shaking only after she reached her. Truck in the parking lot. The man's casual arrogance felt rehearsed, like he'd had similar conversations before, and was confident in his untouchability. The steering wheel was cold under her fingers as she sat collecting her thoughts, the winter afternoon already fading toward dusk. At the corner store near Nadine's building, Greer stopped for coffee, needing the warmth and caffeine to clear her head. 2 elderly women with shopping baskets were talking in hushed tones by the magazine rack, their gray heads close together. "Just like what happened at the Monroe Street place," one whispered, her liver-spotted hand clutching her friend's arm. "Remember? That poor family's cat that supposedly got out onto the fire escape." "Shh, Martha. You know we can't talk about that. Not if we want to keep our apartments. The walls have ears in this neighborhood." The second woman glanced around nervously. They fell silent when they noticed Greer, hurrying away toward the canned goods with fearful glances over their shoulders, their conversation evaporating like breath in cold air. Back at the clinic, Moxie greeted her with a stronger tail wag from his recovery cage. The bruising around his neck was darker now, purple-black against his fawn fur, but his eyes were brighter and more alert. Jenny had left a note saying she'd hand-fed him some soft food that he'd managed to keep down. Greer sat beside his cage, mind racing as she extended her fingers through the bars. The microchip. The accidental open window. Lang's thinly veiled threats. The whispered conversation about Monroe Street. Pieces of a puzzle she didn't want to believe, but couldn't ignore. A pattern was emerging, ugly and deliberate. "What really happened to you?" she asked Moxie softly. watching his trusting eyes. "And how many others are there?" The puppy pressed his warm nose against her hand through the cage bars, offering comfort despite everything he'd been through. His unquestioning trust ignited something fierce and protective in Greer's chest. She felt the familiar steel of determination settle in her spine, the same feeling she'd had as a child watching her father don his firefighter gear, running toward danger when others fled. This wasn't just about one puppy anymore. Something darker lurked behind Porter Lang's polished facade, a pattern of cruelty used as a tool for profit, a calculated scheme that treated lives as disposable. And she had stumbled right into the middle of it, perhaps the only person willing to connect the dots that others were too frightened to see. Greer's fingers flew across her keyboard, scanning through the county's public animal registration database. After 3 hours of cross-referencing addresses with Lang's property listings, patterns emerged that made her stomach turn. "Monroe Street," she muttered, clicking through records. A registered Maine Coon cat mysteriously fell 8 stories. Owner evicted 2 weeks later. On Cedar Avenue, a golden retriever escaped onto a 4th-floor ledge. Another eviction followed. The most recent was on Elm Street, a terrier found dead in a stairwell from unknown causes. Family moved out within the month. She sat back, rubbing her tired eyes. The dates lined up perfectly with Lang's building renovations and rent increases. Each accident had cleared out long-term tenants paying below market rates. Jenny poked her head in. "There's someone here to see you. Says he's from Animal Control." Boone Kerrigan stood in the waiting room, his broad shoulders filling out the olive-green uniform. Steel blue eyes assessed her carefully as she approached. "Dr. Whitlow? I'm Officer Kerrigan. Heard you've been looking into some pet incidents at Langridge Properties. Please, call me Greer." She led him to her office. "And yes, I have. Found some interesting patterns. My advice? Stop looking." His voice was gruff, but not unkind. "Lang's got friends in high places. These cases get marked accidental before the ink's dry." Greer pulled up her research. 3 buildings in 4 months. Each time a pet dies mysteriously, and suddenly the owner can't fight an eviction. That's not coincidence, Officer Kerrigan. "Boone," he corrected, then sighed. "Look, I've seen Lang's work before. Man knows how to work the system. Makes problems disappear." "Like this?" She showed him Moxie's intake photos, the bruising, the damaged ear. The puppy was recovering in the next room, his gentle snores barely audible. Boone studied the images, his jaw tightening. "Hell of a coincidence, that window being open. Tenant swear she didn't leave it that way." "Nadine was terrified. Said she always keeps it locked because of her dog." Greer pulled up more files. "Just like the Monroe Street case. Window supposedly left open by a woman who'd lived there 12 years, never had an incident." "I remember that one." Boone's expression darkened. "Report came across my desk. Something felt off, but by the time I got there..." He trailed off, looking troubled. "The evidence was gone?" Greer guessed. He nodded slowly. "Lang's maintenance crew works fast, real fast at cleaning up loose ends. So help me investigate." Greer met his gaze steadily. "These people lost their homes. Their pets were killed. Someone needs to stand up." Boone studied her for a long moment. "You don't scare easy, do you? I wrestle 100-pound dogs for a living. Takes more than veiled threats to back me down." A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. "All right, show me what you found." They spent the next hour reviewing cases. Boone's law enforcement experience spotted details she'd missed. Maintenance records altered just before incidents, security cameras conveniently malfunctioning, witness statements that contradicted official reports. "Lang's careful," Boone said. "Never leaves a clear trail, but patterns there if you know where to look." Question is, what do we do about it? Before he could answer, Jenny rushed in. Greer, weird call just came in. Guy wouldn't leave a name, but... She hesitated. What did he say? Said to tell you to drop the stray or lose your license. Then hung up. Greer felt a chill, remembering Lang's smooth threat about regulatory complications. Beside her, Boone straightened, all traces of casualness gone. They're watching the clinic, he said quietly. Probably followed me here. He turned to Greer. Still want to pursue this? She thought of Moxie's trust despite his trauma, of Nadine's fear, of all the others who'd lost homes and beloved pets to Lang's schemes. Someone has to, she said firmly. Boone nodded, respect evident in his eyes. Then we do this smart. Build an airtight case before we move. I've got contacts in the property crimes unit, people who aren't on Lang's payroll. I can get veterinary records, document the pattern of injuries. Greer was already planning. Maybe find previous tenants willing to talk. Carefully, he cautioned. Lang's got eyes everywhere. We tip our hand too soon. I know, but I'm not backing down. Yeah, Boone said, a real smile finally breaking through. I'm getting that about you. He pulled out his card, scribbling a number on the back. My personal cell. Any more threats, any sign someone's watching? You call, day or night. Greer took the card, feeling the weight of the alliance they'd just formed. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This gets ugly before it gets better. He headed for the door, then paused. But for what it's worth, you're right. Someone needs to stand up. Might as well be us. After he left, Greer checked on Moxie. The puppy's tail thumped against his bedding as she approached. Got some backup now, little guy, she told him softly. And we're going to make sure what happened to you doesn't happen to anyone else. The anonymous threat still echoed in her mind, but it no longer frightened her. Lang had picked the wrong vet to intimidate. She had truth on her side now, and an ally who understood both justice and danger. Together, they would expose what Lang had buried for so long, whatever the cost. The stairs creaked under their feet as Greer and Boone climbed to the third floor of the Monroe Street building. Paint peeled from the walls in long strips like dying vegetation, and a musty smell hung in the air, thick with neglect and the faint undertone of mildew. Water stains mapped forgotten leaks across the ceiling, telling a silent story of maintenance ignored. Mrs. Chen? Boone knocked gently, his knuckles barely disturbing the weathered door. Animal control. We'd like to ask about what happened to your cat. Silence stretched between them, heavy and uncertain, then chain locks rattled with metallic precision. A tiny elderly woman with deep lines etched around wary eyes peered through the crack, her small frame tensed as though ready to slam the door shut. You come about Tiger? Yes, ma'am, Greer said softly, adopting the gentle tone she reserved for frightened animals and their equally frightened owners. I'm Dr. Whitlow. We're looking into similar incidents. We believe what happened wasn't an accident. Mrs. Chen's eyes darted nervously down the hall, scanning for eavesdroppers, before she reluctantly widened the gap and let them in. The apartment was spotless but sparse, with furniture that had seen decades of careful use. Photos of a handsome orange tabby cat were prominently displayed on an end table, surrounded by small offerings, a tiny dish of treats that would never be eaten, a catnip mouse still new and bright. They say tiger jump. Mrs. Chen's hands twisted in her lap, fingers working against each other like restless birds. But my tiger, he afraid of heights. Never go near window before. 16 years, he sleep on same chair, same blanket. Her voice cracked slightly. Never once try to leave. Was your window usually locked? Greer asked, noting how the woman's eyes kept drifting to the empty cat bed in the corner. always locked. Every day, every night, I old but not forgetful. She tapped her temple with one gnarled finger. But that day, she shook her head, lips pressing tight against each other. Maintenance man come morning before. Say need check heating. Very rushed. Not like regular man. Next day, window open, tiger gone. She pushed herself up with trembling hands and shuffled to a drawer, pulling out a familiar-looking notice. Then this come, 2 days after. Not even time to look for him. Boone examined the eviction paper, his jaw tightening. Same letterhead as Nadine's, same corporate language, same claims of lease violation due to dangerous pet behavior, same heartless efficiency. Did they ever let you see Tiger's body? Greer asked gently. Mrs. Chen's eyes filled with tears. They say he run away after fall. No body, no nothing. 16 years, just... She made a vanishing gesture with her small hands. They heard similar stories at 4 more apartments spread across 2 buildings. Windows mysteriously opened in homes where they had always been sealed tight. Maintenance visits just before each incident. Pets who'd never shown aggression suddenly attacking neighbors or escaping through previously secured exits. The details varied, but the pattern remained disturbingly consistent. Every tenant received identical notices within days, citing unsafe conditions and forcing them out of homes they'd lived in for years. Lang's using the same playbook in every building, Boone said as they left the last apartment, a basement unit where a gecko had somehow escaped and threatened a neighbor, but proving it without catching them in the act. Maybe we need someone who knows these buildings from the inside out, Greer mused, the beginnings of a plan forming as she studied the architectural similarities. Someone who'd spot what we're missing, things that wouldn't look suspicious to us but would stand out to an expert. That's how they found themselves at Eldon Pike's modest house on the edge of town that afternoon. The retired firefighter answered their knock in worn flannel and scuffed work boots, his gray beard neatly trimmed against weathered skin that spoke of decades fighting flames and winter winds. Lang's buildings? Eldon's eyes narrowed with immediate recognition, bushy eyebrows drawing together. Know 'em well as my own backyard. Fought fires in most over 30 years' service, some more than once. He studied them with frank assessment. What's your interest in those death traps? They explained the pattern they'd uncovered, the suspicious timing, the frightened tenants. Eldon listened intently, occasionally nodding as though pieces were falling into place for him as well. Timing caught my eye too, he said, disappearing into his garage with purpose. He returned moments later with a stack of city documents, dog-eared and annotated with meticulous notes. Been tracking Lang's permit application since I retired. Man's getting demolition approval faster than I've ever seen in 40 years watching this city work. Claims emergency safety issues, gets rubber-stamped clearance while buildings that actually need attention wait months. He spread the papers across his kitchen table, creating a timeline of suspicious efficiency. See here, application filed same day as that Monroe Street incident. And here, Maple Avenue approval right after their dog attacked. His weathered finger traced dates with the precision of someone who'd spent a lifetime reading emergency reports. Every time, safety inspector signs off within hours. No proper review, no independent assessment. Just in and out, done deal. He's gaming the system, Boone realized, leaning forward to study the patterns. Creating dangerous conditions to force fast-track permits, making emergencies instead of responding to them. But why target buildings that are still occupied? Greer asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. That's more trouble than empty ones. Rent control, Eldon said grimly, tapping another set of documents. Most tenants been there decades, paying well below market. Lang can't raise rent or evict without cause. City ordinances protect them. but if pets endanger others or create health hazards, he gets rid of protected tenants legally, Greer finished, disgust rising like bile in her throat. Then demolishes for luxury development where he can charge triple. And maintenance helps stage the accidents, Boone added, connecting more dots. Probably unlocks windows, plants evidence, maybe even… He couldn't finish the thought, but his eyes darkened with the unspoken possibility. Greer's hands clenched into tight fists, nails digging half-moons into her palms. Those people trusted Lang to maintain their homes, to keep them safe. Instead, he's using that access to destroy their lives, their families. She thought of Mrs. Chen's tears, the empty cat bed. They're not just losing apartments. They're losing everything. Eldon studied her fierce expression, measuring her determination. Takes guts standing up to someone like Lang. Man's got friends in high places. Money talks in this town, always has. He's hurting people who can't fight back, Greer said, her voice steady despite the anger burning beneath it. Using innocent animals as weapons, destroying families that have nowhere else to go. Someone has to stop him. Count me in, Eldon said without hesitation, pushing himself up from the table. Know these buildings inside out, every crawl space, every ventilation system. Might spot things others miss. Been waiting for someone with the spine to take this on. Boone nodded slowly, the professional caution in his eyes balanced by growing resolve. 3 sets of eyes better than 2, but we move careful. Document everything. Build a case they can't ignore or bury. I can get maintenance records, Eldon offered, already moving toward a filing cabinet. Still no folks in the permit office who owe me. People remember who pulled them out of burning buildings. I'll pull together medical evidence, Greer said, mentally cataloging the resources at her clinic. Build a case showing the pattern of injuries. No way all these pets suddenly became dangerous at once. And I'll work my police contacts, Boone added, determination hardening his features. Someone's got to be willing to look closer at these accidents. Not everyone's in Lang's pocket. They spent another hour planning, comparing notes, building strategy. 3 strangers becoming allies in the face of calculated cruelty. When they finally left Eldon's house, the sky had darkened to deep purple, scattered stars emerging above the neighborhood's modest rooftops. Think we can really stop him? Greer asked quietly as they walked to their cars, her breath visible in the cooling evening air. Together? Boone's voice held certainty as he looked back at the warm light from Eldon's windows. Yeah, Lang's smart, but he's not expecting anyone to connect the dots. 3 people who know where to look, who aren't afraid to stand up, that's his worst nightmare. Greer thought of Mrs. Chen's grief, Nadine's terror, all the others living in fear of that next maintenance visit, that next accident. Good. Time someone gave him nightmares instead of the other way around? The streetlights flickered on as they walked to their cars, casting long shadows across cracked sidewalks. But Greer felt stronger than she had in days. Lang might have money and influence on his side, but they had truth on theirs. And now, a team committed to exposing his calculated cruelty, one piece of evidence at a time. The real fight was just beginning, and for the first time, Greer believed they might actually win. The pre-dawn air bit cold as Greer and Boone crouched behind a dumpster, watching Eldon secure the last motion sensor camera. They'd chosen the Bradford Street building, one of Lang's older properties, as their surveillance target. 3rd floor windows perfect, Eldon whispered when he rejoined them. Clear view of the maintenance entrance and side alley. Greer checked the feed on her tablet. 3 tiny screens showed different angles of the building's access points. Signal's good. If anyone's staging accidents, we'll catch them. Got the chip scanner? Boone asked. She patted her jacket pocket. Ready to check every animal that comes through my clinic against Lang's registrations. The sun was barely up when Greer arrived at her veterinary practice. Her assistant Sarah's worried face greeted her. "There's someone here from the city." Two stern-faced inspectors stood in her waiting room, clipboards ready. "Routine health inspection," the taller one announced. "Had some complaints about sanitation." Greer's stomach tightened. She'd maintained spotless conditions for 15 years. This was no coincidence. For the next 3 hours, they scrutinized every corner of her clinic. They swabbed surfaces, measured chemical concentrations, examined her sterilization logs. Each time they found nothing, their frowns deepened. "Your controlled substance cabinet's lock seems loose," one finally declared. "It was inspected last month," Greer countered. "I have the certification." They left with thin excuses about following up, but the damage was done. Her waiting room had emptied during their visit. Sarah reported 3 cancellations. "What's going on?" Sarah asked. "We've never had complaints before." Greer couldn't explain without putting her assistant at risk. "Just bureaucracy," she said. "We'll be fine." Her phone buzzed. Boone. "Got problems," he said without preamble. "Lang filed a formal complaint. Says I'm harassing his tenants, interfering with legal business. Chief put me on administrative leave pending review." Greer's free hand clenched. "He's trying to isolate us. Gets worse. Someone's been asking questions at the station about your controlled substance permits. Watch your back." She was logging chip numbers that evening when Nadine burst in, clutching a paper. "They're throwing us out," her voice cracked. 72 hours to leave or they'll call the sheriff." Greer read the notice. Lang cited the dangerous animal incident as grounds for immediate eviction under safety clauses. "My baby just started school here," Nadine whispered. I can't afford." She pressed her fists to her eyes. "We won't let this happen," Greer promised. But her words felt hollow. Their evidence was still circumstantial. Lang was moving faster than they'd expected. That night, she sat in her office reviewing camera feeds. Empty halls, locked doors. Nothing suspicious yet. Her eyes burned from fatigue. A knock made her jump. Sarah stood in the doorway. "Mrs. Henderson canceled Tommy's surgery. Said she heard we had problems with our medical storage." She hesitated. "Other clients are asking questions, too." Greer nodded heavily. The whispers were spreading, just as Lang intended. She'd built her practice on trust and reputation. He knew exactly where to strike. Her phone lit up with a text from Eldon. "Camera 2 spotted maintenance entering 3 a.m. No work orders filed." She studied the grainy footage. 2 men with tool belts, working on a window in an empty unit. Making preparations for another accident? Her tablet pinged. Another chip registration alert. A boxer named Rex, previously registered to the Willards in apartment 4C, now listed under Langridge Holdings. But the Willards still lived there. She added it to her growing file of suspicious transfers. The evidence was mounting, but not fast enough. Nadine had 3 days. Boone was sidelined. Her own practice was under siege. Lang was systematically dismantling their resistance while maintaining perfect deniability. She rubbed her temples, fighting exhaustion. The motion sensors blinked steadily on her screen. Somewhere in those feeds, Lang's men were setting up their next target. More families would lose their homes. More pets would be put in danger. "We have to work faster," she texted Boone and Eldon. "Lang's not waiting." Boone replied instantly. "Meeting tomorrow. Got an idea. Hold on." She looked at the growing stack of documents on her desk. Chip records, maintenance logs, permit applications. Somewhere in this maze of paperwork was the proof they needed. She just had to find it before Lang struck again. Her computer chimed with another canceled appointment. She ignored it, focusing on the camera feeds. They would catch Lang's people in the act. They had to. Across town, Nadine was probably packing her family's belongings, wondering where they would go. Greer couldn't let that happen. Not to her, not to anyone else. Lang might have money and influence, but she had truth on her side. And she wasn't backing down. Outside her window, the sky lightened toward dawn. Another sleepless night, but she barely noticed. There was too much at stake to rest. The cameras kept blinking, recording, waiting to catch the evidence they desperately needed. Greer pulled up to Nadine's building as the sun sank behind the industrial skyline. Moving boxes were already stacked by the curb, a sight that made her stomach clench. She found Nadine's door open, the small apartment in disarray. Nadine sat cross-legged on the floor, folding her son's clothes with trembling hands. "I found us a motel," Nadine said without looking up. "Just until—" Her voice cracked. "My sister might take us in Rochester, but Jason's school—" She pressed a tiny t-shirt to her face. Greer knelt beside her. "We're not giving up yet. You don't understand." Nadine's whisper was fierce. "This morning, someone broke in, nothing taken, just moved things around, left the window open. They want us to know they can get in any time." The calculated cruelty of it made Greer's jaw tighten. "Come stay at my place. I have room. I can't risk it. These people—" Nadine gestured helplessly at the walls. "They have keys, connections. Nobody stops them." A knock made them both jump, but it was only Eldon, holding what looked like lab equipment. "Found something interesting," he said, pulling Moxie's damaged collar from an evidence bag. "Been analyzing the tear pattern." He spread his tools on Nadine's kitchen counter, magnifying glass, testing swabs, a small UV light. His weathered hands moved with precise care over the frayed nylon. "See these marks?" He pointed to white residue along the edges. "That's not normal wear. This is chemical scoring. Weakens the material in specific spots." He swabbed the residue and applied a testing solution. The liquid turned bright blue. "What is it?" Greer leaned closer. "Demolition adhesive, industrial-grade stuff, used in controlled demolitions to pre-weaken support structures." Eldon's eyes were hard. Someone deliberately treated this collar to fail when stressed. They engineered that accident. Nadine made a small, choked sound. "But why go to such lengths?" Greer wondered. "Why not just—" She stopped, realizing. "Because they need it to look like tenant negligence," Eldon finished. "Clean eviction, no messy legal battles. Building gets cleared faster." "And they can flip it for luxury condos," came Boone's voice from the doorway. He stepped in, still in civilian clothes. "Sorry I'm late. Been doing some digging off the books." Despite everything, Greer felt a flutter of relief at his presence. He carried himself differently out of uniform, more relaxed, but somehow more focused. "Lang's company has a pattern," he continued. "Buy old buildings with rent-controlled units, create safety incidents to trigger mass evictions, file for emergency renovation permits. 6 months later, luxury apartments at triple the rent." "How many buildings?" Greer asked. "At least 12 in the last 3 years. Always the same setup. Pet accidents, mysterious maintenance issues, tenants forced out for safety violations." His jaw clenched. "I helped clear some of those buildings, never questioned the reports." "You're helping now," Greer said quietly. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Shared purpose, maybe, or something deeper. Eldon's equipment beeped. "Got a chemical match?" he announced. "This specific adhesive compound is only sold to licensed demolition companies." He looked grimly satisfied. "And I bet if we check the maintenance logs—" "Lang's crew would have signed in to do routine repairs before each incident," Boone finished. Nadine stood suddenly. I have those logs. The super makes a sign whenever maintenance enters. I kept copies after what happened. She dug through a box, hands shaking, and pulled out a folder. They spread the papers across her kitchen table. Dates, times, signatures. A pattern emerged. Maintenance visits logged just days before each reported incident. "This is it," Greer breathed. "Physical evidence linking Lang's people to deliberate sabotage. If we can prove they bought the adhesive." "Already on it," Boone said. "Called in some favors at the department. Purchase records are public info for licensed contractors." Eldon gathered his testing equipment. "I'll document the chemical analysis, get it notarized, make it court-worthy." Greer touched Nadine's arm. "Will you testify? Tell them what really happened?" Nadine looked at her sleeping son's room, then at the half-packed boxes. Her voice was steel when she answered. "Yes, for Jason. For everyone they've hurt." Boone moved closer to Greer, his presence solid and reassuring. "Lang's people are watching. This gets more dangerous from here." "I know." She met his concerned gaze. "But we can't back down now." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. They were all in too deep to retreat, bound together by shared risk and growing conviction. The evidence was mounting. Lang's careful facade was cracking. But they had to move fast before more families lost their homes, before more innocent lives were endangered. Greer looked at Moxie's collar, proof of calculated cruelty turned weapon of justice. Sometimes the smallest threads, pulled carefully, could unravel the largest schemes. They worked late into the night, organizing evidence, planning their next moves. Outside, the city hummed with its usual rhythms, unaware that in this small apartment, a group of unlikely allies was building a case that would expose years of hidden corruption. Greer sat in her clinic's back office, surrounded by stacks of evidence and cold coffee. The morning sun slanted through dusty blinds, catching motes in its beam. Her eyes burned from another sleepless night reviewing documents. The phone rang, making her jump. It was Carmen Torres, her old college roommate who now worked as an insurance underwriter. "Listen carefully," Carmen said, her voice low and urgent. "I've been looking into what you asked about Lang's properties. His entire empire rests on maintaining platinum-level liability coverage. Without it, his loans default." Greer straightened, suddenly alert. "What are you saying?" "Insurance companies hate systemic risk. If you can prove a pattern of deliberate negligence and cruelty, not just isolated incidents, his whole policy could collapse." Carmen paused. "And Greer? His renewal audit is in 3 weeks. Hope flickered in Greer's chest. "That's our window. Be careful. Lang's got friends in high places." The line went dead. Greer was still processing this when her receptionist knocked. "Dr. Whitlow, there's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent." A man stood in the waiting room, shoulders hunched like he was trying to disappear. Oil-stained hands, work boots, the weary eyes of someone who'd seen too much. "I'm Zeke," he said quietly. "Maintenance supervisor for Langridge Holdings." His eyes darted to the windows. "Can we talk somewhere private?" In her office, Zeke perched on the edge of a chair, twisting his worn cap. "Been with Lang 15 years. Used to be honest work, keeping the buildings running. Then the accidents started." "You know about those?" Greer kept her voice neutral. "Know about them?" Bitter laugh. "I had to stage half of them. Doctor up maintenance logs, plant evidence, whatever Porter ordered." He pulled out a folded paper. "But this morning, found out my grandson's dog was targeted. That's where I draw the line." He smoothed the paper on her desk. It was covered in strings of numbers and letters. Access codes to Lang's surveillance servers. Every camera, every digital lock, every security feed. Been collecting them just in case. Greer's heart raced. Why trust me? Been watching you. You're the only one who stood up to him. Zeke met her eyes. I'm tired of faking evidence, of hurting innocent people. Maybe it's time to make some real evidence instead. Greer called Boone and Eldon. Within an hour, they huddled around her computer as Zeke logged into Lang's system. Screens filled with camera feeds, maintenance records, digital timestamps. There, Zeke pointed. Every accident gets logged as a security incident. But look at the timestamps. Maintenance visits always happen just before, using my codes. And here, he pulled up a chat log. Direct orders from Porter about which units to check. Boone whistled softly. Digital fingerprints, time-stamped proof of premeditation. Can you download all this? Greer asked. Zeke nodded. Already started, but we need to hurry. It does security sweeps every 48 hours. Eldon studied the building schematics. These access codes, they work on the physical doors too? Every door in every Lang building, Zeke confirmed. That's how we plant the evidence. Then we can get proof of the demolition adhesive storage, Greer realized. Match it to Moxie's collar. I'll help, Zeke said. Know where everything's kept, but... He hesitated. Lang finds out I helped, I lose everything. My pension, my family's apartment. Greer touched his arm. We'll protect you. Your grandson's dog, too. Speaking of protection, Boone said, we should move fast. Lang's probably already noticed unusual server access. They worked through the afternoon, downloading files, cross-referencing incidents. Zeke's insider knowledge proved invaluable, pointing them to hidden folders, explaining coded maintenance entries. Look at this pattern, Greer said, spreading printouts across her desk. Every targeted tenant had rent control. Every accident happened within days of refusing buyout offers. And here, Boone added, insurance claims filed before incidents were even reported. They planned it all. Zeke's phone buzzed. His face went pale. Porter's called an emergency maintenance meeting for tonight. He knows something's wrong. Then we finish this now, Greer decided. Zeke, can you get us into the maintenance office? We need those adhesive purchase records. He nodded slowly. Night Guard owes me. I can get you 20 minutes. They gathered their evidence, made backup copies. Greer felt the weight of risk and responsibility, but also a fierce determination. With Zeke's help, they finally had a chance to expose Lang's whole operation. The sun was setting as they finalized their plan. Tomorrow, they would make their move. But tonight, they had to protect their digital treasure trove. Proof that could finally bring justice to Lang's victims. Zeke stood to leave, then paused. My grandson asked why bad people hurt dogs, he said quietly. I didn't have an answer. Maybe now I can tell him sometimes good people fight back. Greer watched him go, this unlikely ally whose conscience had finally outweighed his fear. Sometimes, she thought, the bravest acts came from the most unexpected sources. The condemned building loomed against the night sky, its broken windows like empty eyes. Greer pulled her truck into the shadow of a loading dock, killing the engine. Her heart thudded as she checked her watch. 2:15 in the morning. Boone's police SUV glided silently beside her, lights off. He stepped out wearing dark clothes, his usual uniform replaced by tactical gear. Zeke's already inside, he whispered. Disabled the main alarm 10 minutes ago. They crossed the cracked parking lot, staying close to the walls. Paint peeled like scabs from the brick facade. A rusty sign read, Langridge Holdings, property under renovation. Zeke met them at a side door, his maintenance keys jingling softly. Server room's on the 3rd floor, he said. Night Guard makes rounds every 30 minutes. We just missed him, so we've got 25 minutes tops. The door creaked open. Stale air hit them. Dust, mold, abandonment. Their flashlight beams caught cobwebs and debris. Every footstep echoed through empty halls. Elevator's dead, Zeke warned. Stairs only. They climbed in silence, passing floors gutted for renovation. Greer's beam swept across exposed wiring, torn up floors. Perfect places to stage accidents, she thought grimly. The server room hummed behind a heavy metal door. Zeke's hands shook slightly as he entered the code. 6 minutes until the system logs my access, he muttered. Inside, rows of black cabinets blinked with tiny lights. The air conditioning blast made Greer shiver. Boone pulled out an external drive while Zeke found the right terminals. Here, Zeke pointed. Security footage archive. Everything from the past 2 years. Greer watched the progress bar crawl across the screen. 5 minutes. 4 minutes. Her palms were sweating. Got something? Boone said suddenly. He'd opened a recent file. The grainy footage showed a maintenance worker, not Zeke, entering an apartment. They watched him carefully position a dog leash near an open window, then place what looked like treats on the sill. That's Martinez, Zeke said. Lang's go-to guy for the setups. More footage revealed similar scenes. Workers tampering with door locks, planting evidence, even agitating animals before accidents. Each clip was damning proof of orchestrated cruelty. A distant door slammed. Footsteps echoed up the stairwell. Guards early, Zeke hissed. We need to move now. Boone yanked the drive free. Greer grabbed their papers. They slipped into the hallway just as flashlight beams swept the corner. Hey, stop right there! They ran. Boots thundered behind them. Not just one guard, several. Armed security, moving with professional precision. This way. Zeke led them down a maintenance corridor. Boiler room access. Connects to the tunnels. They pounded down metal stairs into the building's guts. Steam pipes hissed overhead. The air grew thick and hot. BRDM security, stop or we will use force. The voice carried authority. Not rent-a-cops. Trained professionals. Zeke heaved open a heavy door. Tunnel network. Runs under 3 blocks of Lang's properties. They plunged into darkness. Their flashlights caught glimpses of concrete walls, rusted pipes, scurrying rats. Water dripped somewhere ahead. The tunnels branched like a maze. Left, Zeke gasped. Then second right. Comes up in the old garage. Footsteps echoed behind them, multiplied by the tunnel acoustics. Impossible to tell how close. Greer's lungs burned. The drive with their evidence bounced against Boone's chest as he ran. A bullet pinged off pipework. The sound exploded in the confined space. They're shooting? Greer's voice cracked with disbelief. Private security, Boone panted. Operating outside police jurisdiction, no rules. They rounded another corner. Zeke pointed to a ladder. Up there, quick! One by one they scrambled up. Greer's hands slipped on wet rungs. Above, Boone strained against a heavy cover. It finally gave with a grinding sound. They emerged into an abandoned garage, gasping in the cool night air. Boone dragged the cover back in place as flashlight beams stabbed up through the gaps. Cars, he ordered. Split up, go! Greer sprinted for her truck, fumbling with keys, engine roaring to life. Through her rearview mirror, she saw Boone and Zeke peeling away in different directions. Only when she was miles away, heart still racing, did the full impact hit her. Lang didn't just have private security. He had a militant force willing to use lethal methods. And they'd responded too quickly, too professionally, to her team's presence. She pulled over, hands shaking as she called Boone. He answered on the first ring. You okay? Yeah. Zeke too. Just got his text. But Boone, they knew we were coming. That guard was early. They were ready. A heavy pause. Lang's got someone inside, Boone said grimly. Someone monitoring police channels, security networks, maybe even case files. How deep does this go? Don't know. But we got what we came for." She heard him pat the drive. "And now we know what we're up against." Greer watched dawn creep over the city, painting the empty streets in pale light. They had their evidence, footage that proved Lang's systematic cruelty. But they'd also learned their enemy was more powerful, more connected than they'd imagined. She touched her jacket pocket, feeling the hard shape of Moxie's old collar. Sometimes the right path was the hardest one, and tonight had shown just how hard this fight would be. Greer's hands trembled as she packaged the USB drives. She'd made 3 copies of the damning security footage, one for Amy Chen at the Animal Welfare League, another for Marcus Rivera at the City Tribune, and one backup hidden at Eldon's house. Each package contained selected clips showing Lang's workers staging accidents, along with dates and building addresses. "You sure about this?" Boone asked, watching her seal the last envelope. "They need to see it themselves." Greer labeled the packages with pre-printed shipping labels, no return address. The footage speaks for itself. Within days, the evidence hit like a thunderbolt. Amy Chen's preliminary investigation expanded into a full probe. Marcus Rivera's front-page story exposed Lang's systematic animal cruelty scheme. Photos of staged accidents and falsified reports filled the morning papers. Greer watched from her clinic window as police cars surrounded one of Lang's buildings. 2 contractors were led out in handcuffs, caught in the act of rigging another accident with a tenant's cat. Their arrest photos showed up on the evening news. "We did it," she told Moxie, who was curled up in his favorite spot near the reception desk. The puppy's ear, permanently folded from his near-death experience, twitched as she scratched behind it. "Lang can't hide anymore." But victory felt hollow. Porter Lang hadn't been arrested. His name barely appeared in the coverage, everything blamed on Rouge contractors and unauthorized actions by maintenance staff. Then the retaliation began. Greer arrived at work to find her clinic's windows shattered. Glass crunched under her feet as she walked through examining rooms. Medical supplies were strewn across floors, cabinets emptied, expensive equipment smashed. Even the fish tank in the waiting room had been tipped over, leaving dead tropical fish on the carpet. Her 2 vet techs quit that same day. "We're sorry," Maria said, close to tears. "But someone called my husband's boss. He got demoted without cause, and Jenny's mom lost her apartment lease." "I understand," Greer said quietly. She did understand. Lang was attacking not just her, but anyone connected to her. That night, she triple-checked all the locks before leaving. Moxie rode home with her as usual, curled up in his travel crate. But when she went to bring him inside her house, the crate was empty. The back panel had been pried loose during her brief stop for gas. Her scream brought neighbors running. But Moxie was gone. She called Boone immediately, her voice cracking. "They took him. Lang took Moxie." "Stay there. I'm coming over." But Boone never made it to her house. He spotted Porter Lang walking into his favorite coffee shop, and something in him snapped. The security footage later showed Boone charging across the street, grabbing Lang's expensive suit jacket. "Where's the dog?" Boone shoved Lang against a parked car. "What did you do with him?" Lang's calm smile made it worse. "Officer Kerrigan, or should I say former officer, assaulting a private citizen in broad daylight. Not very professional. If anything happens to that dog..." Boone's hands shook with the effort not to throw a punch. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean." Lang straightened his jacket. "Though I did hear about Dr. Whitlow's recent troubles. Tragic how quickly things can fall apart. Her practice, her staff, her reputation. Even pets can disappear without a trace." Boone's fist cocked back. Only a passing patrol car's siren made him release Lang instead. "You think you're untouchable," Boone growled, "but we have proof. Real proof this time. Proof? Lang's laugh was soft and dangerous. Grainy security footage that could have been doctored, accusations from disgruntled ex-employees. Please. He stepped closer, voice dropping. You used to understand how things work, Officer Kerrigan. Back when you helped me clear that North Side property. Remember those falsified reports you signed? Boone went pale. That was different. You lied to me. Did I? Or did you simply choose not to ask questions? Either way, your signature is still on those documents. Lang brushed past him. Be careful which stones you throw, officer. Glass houses are so fragile. He walked away, leaving Boone shaking with rage and shame in the middle of the sidewalk. The victory they'd thought was within reach had turned to ashes. Lang hadn't just survived their evidence. He'd turned it back on them, attacking everything they cared about. Greer sat in her vandalized clinic that evening, surrounded by broken equipment and shattered glass. Her phone kept ringing with cancellations as longtime clients suddenly found other vets. She had no staff, no moxie, and no idea how to fight an enemy who could strike from so many angles. But as she swept up pieces of her destroyed practice, she refused to let despair win. Long had showed his true face, not just cruel, but vindictive. He'd made this personal. And somehow, that made her more determined than ever. She picked up a framed photo from the debris, Moxie on his first day at the clinic, already showing that stubborn spark that earned his name. I'll find you, she whispered, whatever it takes. Greer's hands trembled as she placed another missing dog poster on a telephone pole. 3 days had passed since Moxie's disappearance. Her eyes burned from crying and lack of sleep. Every time she closed them, she saw his trusting brown eyes, imagined him scared and alone somewhere. The sudden ring of her phone made her jump. Nadine's name flashed on the screen. Greer? Nadine's voice cracked with panic. My baby. They took Marcus during the inspection. Please, you have to help. Slow down. What inspection? Lang's men. They said they needed to check the boiler system. I had to let them in. It's in the lease. Marcus was napping. I just went to get their paperwork, and when I came back... A sob broke through. He's gone. My baby's gone. I'm coming right now. Greer was already running to her truck. Call the police. I did. But the dispatcher said since I let them in legally, they have to treat it as a missing person case first. They won't be here for hours. Greer called Boone while driving, tires squealing around corners. He answered on the first ring. Meet me at Nadine's building, she said. They've taken her son. On my way. I'll call Eldon too. He knows those boiler systems better than anyone. Greer's truck skidded to a stop outside the old brick building. Boone's patrol car was already there, and Eldon's battered pickup pulled in right behind her. The retired firefighter's weathered face was grim as he grabbed his tool belt. They found Nadine in the lobby, shaking. There's smoke coming from the basement now. The alarms just started. As if on cue, the building's fire alarm began its piercing wail. Tenants emerged from their apartments, confused and frightened. They're creating chaos, Boone growled, using it as cover. Eldon was already heading for the basement stairs. This way. If they're messing with the boiler, we don't have much time. The stairwell grew hotter as they descended. Thin gray smoke curled around their feet. Greer pulled her shirt over her nose, thinking of tiny Marcus somewhere in this manufactured nightmare. He was only 3. Just a baby, really. The boiler room door was locked. Eldon made quick work of it with his tools while Boone kept watch. Inside, the ancient heating system groaned and hissed. Gauges spun in the red zone. Smoke poured from compromised seals. They've tampered with the pressure release valves, Eldon said. This whole system could blow. Can you fix it? Greer asked. Maybe. but it'll take time we might not have." A child's cry echoed from somewhere above them. Greer's head snapped up. "Marcus!" She ran for the stairs, Boone right behind her. The smoke was thicker now, making her eyes water. The cry came again, from the 6th floor. "Of course," she said bitterly. "Lang's twisted sense of symmetry. Same floor where we found Moxie." They climbed past frightened residents evacuating downward. The higher they went, the worse the smoke became. Heat pressed down like a physical weight. On the 6th floor, something cracked ominously underfoot. Boone grabbed Greer's arm. "The floor's compromised. The heat from below is affecting the structure." "I don't care," she pulled away. "Marcus, can you hear me?" A whimper came from down the hall, from the same apartment where she'd rescued Moxie. Greer moved carefully toward it, testing each step. Floorboards groaned. The apartment door was ajar. Inside, smoke hung like a gray curtain. "Marcus? Help!" The tiny voice came from the bedroom, the one with the deadly window. Greer dropped to her hands and knees where the air was clearer. The bedroom floor had already started to sag. She crawled forward inch by inch, calling softly to keep Marcus calm. He huddled in the corner, tears cutting clean trails through the soot on his face. When he saw her, he reached out with trembling hands. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm going to get you out of here." But as she moved toward him, the floor shifted. A terrible splintering sound filled the air. Greer lunged forward, snatching Marcus just as the boards beneath them started to give way. She scrambled backward on her knees, clutching the boy to her chest. Behind them, a section of floor collapsed entirely, leaving a gaping hole showing the apartment below. "Greer!" Boone's voice was desperate. "Get out of there!" She half crawled, half ran from the bedroom. The whole apartment groaned now. More sections of floor were buckling. She passed Marcus to Boone through the doorway just as another crack split the air. Greer dove forward as the floor beneath her feet disappeared. Boone caught her arm, hauling her into the hallway. They ran for the stairs, Marcus crying against Boone's shoulder. The stairwell was almost impassable now with smoke. They descended as quickly as they dared, Boone leading the way. On the 4th floor, part of the stairs had already collapsed. "This way." Greer pointed to the fire escape through a window, the same one she'd used to save Moxie. They climbed out carefully. The metal was hot enough to burn through their shoes. Below, fire trucks were arriving, their sirens mixing with the building's alarms. When they finally reached the ground, Nadine ran to them sobbing. She clutched Marcus to her chest, covering his sooty face with kisses. Greer sagged against Boone, coughing. Her lungs felt scorched, her eyes stinging. But watching Nadine with her son, she felt a fierce joy. Lang hadn't won this time. Eldon emerged from the building's front door, his face black with soot. "Managed to stabilize the boiler system," he wheezed. "But the damage up top, this whole building's going to be condemned now." "That was their plan all along," Boone said. "Create a disaster that forces everyone out permanently. They nearly killed a child to do it." Greer's voice shook with rage. She watched as paramedics checked Marcus over, his small hand gripping his mother's tightly. "Lang's crossed a line. No more investigations or evidence gathering. We have to stop him now." Smoke burned Greer's eyes as she moved deeper into the building's maze of utility passages. A familiar whimper stopped her cold. She'd know that sound anywhere. "Moxie?" she called softly. The whine came again, stronger this time, from behind a heavy metal door. Through the small window, she caught a glimpse of brindle fur. Her hands shook as she worked the lock with Eldon's borrowed tools. The moment the door swung open, Moxie launched himself into her arms, his whole body trembling. "I've got you, boy. I've got you." Another sound caught her attention, a tiny cough, followed by a sniffle. Greer followed the noise to a maintenance sink area. Crouched beneath the porcelain basin was Marcus, his small face streaked with tears and soot. "Hey there, sweetheart," she said gently, kneeling down. "Remember me from the clinic? Let's get you back to your mama." The boy nodded, reaching for her with trembling hands. She scooped him up, settling him on her hip while keeping Moxie close with her other hand. A crash echoed from the direction she'd come. Boone appeared around the corner, limping heavily. "Greer! The main stairs are gone!" He broke off in a fit of coughing. "Your leg!" Caught under some debris. He waved off her concern. "The fire department can't get in yet. The boiler's about to blow. You need to get them out now." "We'll all go. I'm not leaving you here." "Damn it, Greer, there's no time. That boy needs—" "Shut up and help me think." She looked around frantically. The boiler room was just ahead, gauges spinning wildly in the red zone. "Wait, the manual release valve. You can't get close enough." But she was already moving, setting Marcus down next to Boone. "Keep him back." She shrugged off her coat and wrapped it around her hands. The heat was incredible as she approached the massive boiler. Sweat poured down her face, her skin feeling tight and burned. The manual release valve was almost glowing red. Gritting her teeth, she grabbed it with her coat-wrapped hands. The fabric began to smoke immediately. She threw her whole weight against the valve. For one terrible moment, it wouldn't budge. Then suddenly it turned, releasing a deafening blast of steam. She stumbled back, hands stinging even through the protection of her coat. "The maintenance shaft," Boone called over the noise. "It leads to the roof access ladder." Greer looked where he pointed. A narrow passage disappeared into the wall, too narrow for Boone's broad shoulders. His eyes met hers, understanding passing between them. "I'll find another way," he said. "Just get them out." "You better," she said fiercely, "because I'm coming back for you." She gathered Marcus and Moxie, guiding them into the cramped passage. The drywall was thin here. She kicked out sections as they moved, widening the path just enough to squeeze through. The building groaned around them, shuddering ominously. Marcus whimpered. Moxie pressed close to her legs. "Almost there," she encouraged them. "You're both being so brave." The access ladder was ancient, rust flaking under her hands as she tested it. Below, voices echoed up the shaft. One cut through clearly, Porter Lang's distinctive drawl. "I don't care what it takes," he was saying. "That building needs to come down today. We've got deadlines with the developers. No witnesses. Handle it." Greer's phone was still recording in her pocket, capturing every word. But she couldn't focus on that now. She lifted Marcus onto her back. "Hold on tight, sweetheart. Like a little monkey, okay? And Moxie." She scooped up the puppy, cradling him against her chest with one arm. "Stay still for me, boy." The climb was excruciating. Her burned hands screamed at every rung. Marcus's arms around her neck made it hard to breathe through the smoke. Moxie trembled against her but stayed perfectly still, as if understanding everything depended on it. Another violent shudder ran through the building. Below, Lang was still shouting orders, his voice rising with frustration. "I don't care if the whole block burns. Just get it done." Greer forced herself to keep climbing, one rung at a time. Her world narrowed to the next handhold, the next step up. Nothing existed except the ladder, the precious weights of child and dog, and the desperate need to reach the top. The roof access panel was stuck. She braced herself with her legs, pushing up with her shoulder until it finally gave way. Fresh air rushed down, sweet as heaven. She emerged onto the roof, legs shaking with exhaustion. Carefully, she set Marcus and Moxie down. The boy immediately hugged the puppy, burying his face in Moxie's fur. Sirens wailed below. Through the roof's edge, she could see fire trucks surrounding the building. Lang stood in the street, phone still pressed to his ear, unaware that his own words were sealing his fate. But Greer wasn't done. She had a promise to keep. Somewhere below, Boone was still fighting his way out. She turned back toward the access panel, ready to descend again into the smoke and heat. Through the smoke-filled stairwell, Zeke hunched over his laptop in the building's security office, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Years of maintaining Lang's surveillance systems had taught him every backdoor and override code. Now, those same systems would be Lang's undoing. Come on, he muttered, patching into the building's external speakers and video feeds. The security monitors showed Lang still pacing outside, barking orders into his phone. Zeke's hands trembled as he connected the live audio feed to the building's public address system. Outside, Lang's voice suddenly boomed across the street. "I don't care about the casualties. Once it burns, the insurance pays double. We've done this before." Lang froze mid-sentence, finally registering his own amplified voice. His face drained of color as he realized his words were broadcasting to the gathered crowd of firefighters, police, and news crews. Zeke switched the video feeds to the external digital displays normally used for building advertisements. The screens flickered to life, showing multiple angles of Lang's men tampering with the boiler system earlier that day. Then came footage of them locking Moxie in the utility closet, and finally, hiding Marcus during the inspection. The gathered crowd gasped. Police officers who had been holding back suddenly surged forward, their expressions hardening as they watched the evidence unfold on the massive screens. Lang threw down his phone and tried to run, but uniformed officers were already closing in. "This is all fabricated," he shouted, backing away. "That maintenance worker, he's tampering with—" His words cut off as movement on the roof caught everyone's attention. The video feeds automatically switched to the rooftop cameras, showing Greer emerging from the access panel. Her clothes were singed, her face streaked with soot, but her eyes blazed with determination as she helped Marcus and Moxie onto the roof. The insurance investigator pushed through the crowd, pointing at the screens. "There's your proof. The same pattern we've seen in every building. Lang engineers accidents with pets to trigger evictions, then collects on inflated insurance claims when the buildings conveniently burn." Two officers grabbed Lang's arms as he tried to break free. "You can't prove any of this. It's all circumstantial." "Actually," Zeke's voice came through the speakers, steady and clear despite his racing heart. "We have something better than circumstantial evidence." He played back Lang's phone conversation from just minutes earlier, the damning words echoing across the street. "I don't care if the whole block burns. Just get it done." Lang's face contorted with fury. "You!" He spotted Zeke through the first-floor window. "You're finished. You'll never work in this city again?" "Maybe not," Zeke replied, through the speakers, allowing himself a small smile. "But I can live with that." On the roof, Greer heard the commotion below, but couldn't spare attention for it. She was already heading back toward the access panel when a familiar voice called out, "Greer, over here!" She turned to see Boone pulling himself up onto the roof from the far side fire escape, limping but alive. Relief flooded through her as she ran to help him. "Told you I'd find another way," he said with a pained grin. Below, more police cars arrived. Officers led away Lang's security team in handcuffs, while others helped evacuate the remaining tenants. The insurance investigator was already on his phone, calling in a full fraud investigation team. Nadine burst through the building's front doors, having finally made it past the police line. When she saw Marcus on the roof, she fell to her knees crying. Firefighters immediately began setting up a ladder to bring them down safely. Lang's voice rose in desperate anger as officers read him his rights. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. I have connections. Save it for your lawyer," one officer cut him off, securing the handcuffs. "You're under arrest for racketeering, insurance fraud, animal cruelty, and attempted homicide." Through it all, the screens continued displaying the evidence. Lang's network of corruption unraveling in full public view. News cameras captured everything, including the moment when Greer descended the fire truck's ladder with Marcus in her arms and Moxie tucked safely in her jacket. As paramedics rushed to check them, Greer caught sight of Lang being pushed into a police car. Their eyes met briefly. All his careful facades had crumpled, leaving only the truth of what he was. A man who had built an empire on cruelty and callous disregard for life. Zeke emerged from the building, laptop clutched to his chest. He looked uncertain until Greer caught his eye and nodded. That simple gesture of acknowledgement seemed to straighten his spine. "Ms. Whitlow," the insurance investigator approached her, notepad in hand. "We'll need your full statement, but I want you to know. What you've done here, exposing this operation, you've probably saved countless lives, both human and animal." Greer barely heard him. She was watching Nadine embrace Marcus, their tears of joy mixing with soot and sweat. Moxie wagged his tail, pressing against their legs. Boone stood nearby, receiving treatment for his injured leg, but refusing to take his eyes off her. In that moment, as Lang's police escort drove away and the truth of his crimes played endlessly on the screens above, Greer felt the weight of weeks of fear and determination finally lift. Justice had come not in whispers, but in a public revelation that no amount of money or influence could bury. The small, struggling industrial town would never be the same. Lang's empire of corruption had crumbled, exposed by the very systems he had used to protect it. And it had all started with one woman who refused to look away when she saw a puppy dangling from a window. In the weeks that followed Lang's arrest, justice moved with unexpected speed. The insurance company's investigation revealed decades of systematic fraud, triggering a cascade of legal consequences that brought Langridge Holdings to its knees. Greer sat in her newly repaired clinic, watching the morning news coverage of Lang's empire crumbling. The camera showed workers removing the Langridge Holdings letters from the company's downtown office building. She smiled as Moxie stretched lazily in the patch of sunlight by her feet, his brindle coat now glossy and healthy. "Look who's settling in nicely," Boone said, entering through the back door. He was still using a cane, but insisted on helping with the morning routine. His reinstatement to animal control had come with a commendation and a public apology. "He's not the only one," Greer replied, nodding toward the waiting room where Nadine sat with several other former Lang tenants. They'd formed a support group that met weekly at the clinic. "The court order came through yesterday. They all get to stay in their homes." Boone pulled up a chair beside her desk. "And at the original rent rates, thanks to Zeke's documentation. Speaking of which, his testimony yesterday was something else. Even the judge looked shocked when he detailed Lang's methods." Greer nodded, remembering how Zeke had stood straight-backed in court, his voice steady, as he described years of staged accidents and falsified reports. The maintenance workers' detailed records had become the backbone of the prosecution's case. "Eldon's up next week," she said. "His analysis of the demolition adhesives proved Lang was systematically targeting buildings with rent-controlled tenants. The DA says it's airtight." Through the window, she could see construction crews working on the building where she'd first rescued Moxie. Under new management, it was being properly renovated, with tenants safely relocated to temporary housing instead of being forced out. The clinic phone rang. Boone reached for it, now familiar with the routine. "Dr. Whitlow's office," he answered, then smiled. "Yes, ma'am. We're still offering free checkups for all pets from affected buildings." Greer watched him schedule the appointment, struck by how naturally he'd adapted to clinic work. His presence had helped rebuild trust with clients who'd been scared away during Lang's intimidation campaign. More than that, his steady support had become something she relied on, though neither of them had found the right words to define it yet. "Remember when you warned me to stay out of this?" she asked as he hung up. He chuckled. "Clearly my best advice ever. Though I suppose I should have known better. The moment you climbed that fire escape, you weren't going to let it go." "I just wanted to save one puppy," Greer said softly, reaching down to scratch Moxie's ears. The dog's tail thumped against the floor. "I never imagined. That's usually how it starts," Eldon's voice came from the doorway. The retired firefighter carried a box of donuts, his traditional offering for their morning meetings. "One person does what's right, gives others the courage to do the same." He set the box down and settled into his usual chair. These informal gatherings had become a daily ritual as they helped coordinate the ongoing legal proceedings and support network for affected tenants. "The Housing Commission is using my testimony to rewrite the safety inspection protocols," he reported. "No more rubber stamp approvals, and they're implementing a special task force to investigate any suspicious pattern of pet incidents in rental properties." "Lang's accident scheme is officially dead," Boone confirmed. "The insurance companies are sharing data now, flagging similar patterns across the state." Zeke arrived last, looking more relaxed than Greer had ever seen him. He'd found work with a non-profit housing organization, using his inside knowledge to help protect tenant rights. "Just got word," he announced. "They're converting Lang's old office building into affordable housing. Poetic justice, if you ask me." Greer felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the morning sun. Around her sat people who had risked everything to stand up for what Tom was right. Together they'd not only exposed corruption, but had created lasting change. Moxie got up and made his rounds, visiting each person for attention. When he reached Nadine in the waiting room, her laugh carried through the open door. The sound of healing, of fear, finally laid to rest. "You know," Boone said quietly, watching Greer watch her unlikely family, "courage really is contagious. You showed us that." She shook her head. "We all found it together. She paused, finding the words. "I just couldn't walk away. Not when I knew something was wrong." "And that's exactly why things change," Eldon said, "because sometimes one person stops, looks closer, and decides to act." Through the window, the morning sun caught the clinic's newly repaired sign. Below it, a smaller edition read, "Every life matters." It was both a promise and a reminder of what they'd fought to protect. Greer looked around at her gathered friends, at Moxie curled up safe and content, at the waiting room full of people who no longer had to live in fear. She'd started this journey as someone who healed animals, but she'd become something more. Someone who defended those who couldn't defend themselves. In the quiet of that morning, surrounded by the proof that justice was possible, Greer finally allowed herself to feel the peace she'd been too busy to notice approaching. One rescue, one stand against cruelty, had sparked a change bigger than she'd ever imagined. And in that change, she'd found not just purpose, but family.